Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Flexa webinar. And this time we're talking all about building a global employer brand. Thank you so much for joining us and spending the next hour with us as well. I've got the most fantastic panel ready to talk through all of their experience, advice, learnings, what not to do about building a global employer brand from a multitude of different companies. But first of all, just to make sure that we all are all up and running and you can hear us properly, please could you just pop a comment in if you are able to hear and see us and everything is all right, just so that I know that I'm not talking to absolutely nobody. But I won't pause. I will first of all introduce myself. So if you haven't joined one of our webinars before, I'm Molly. I am the CEO and co-founder of Flexa. And Flexa is the platform that enables companies to get discovered for what makes them unique. So we have 4.5 million users using Flexa, growing by 100,000 new users every single month. And they're coming onto Flexa and conducting some incredibly specific, interesting, wonderful searches to find their next companies. We enable people to filter from everything from hybrid working 3 days a week in the office to dog-friendly offices through to fertility leave and all other benefits that could exist, as well as various different cultures and missions to help you to find your perfect fit. And I am joined by 4 of our absolutely wonderful clients, all of whom will give you plenty of detail in terms of how they're being discovered on Flexa and what the elements of their EVP that they've turned into an employer brand are. So without further ado, I would love to hand over to our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. Helen, I will come to you first.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I work at Microsoft. I'm the recruitment marketing lead for EMEA. So my role is very much about how I partner closely with our TA teams to keep and our employer brand and EVP to life in the market through campaigns. And that's how do we take the global story and tell that regionally.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And Klyde.
Yes, that's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Klyde. I'm currently the employer brand and the talent attraction lead for Mondelēz in Europe. Previously, I've been working with the team in the Southeast Asia base in the Philippines, doing the same, but also doing early careers in that bit. Mondelēz is the makers of the world's favorite snacks, the Cadbury, Toblerone, and Oreos. So basically, my job is to ensure that people know that we are the makers of those, and hopefully you get to join us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Hope.
Hi. Hey, I'm Hope Weatherford. I'm the VP of Talent Acquisition, which includes employee branding at Camunda, and we are a fully remote global first remote company, and we are a leader in enterprise agentic orchestration. That means that we help organizations coordinate AI agents, people, and systems together. My focus is really building a world-class team behind that technology. And because we hire across the globe in places like Boston, Amsterdam, Bangalore, you name it, our employee brand has to really travel really well, right? And the thing that I always like to say is it must feel super consistent and not feel like it's copy pasted. So happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And Rob, last but not least.
Well, hi, everyone. So I'm Rob. I work for Airbus. I'm one of the employment marketing managers, focused mostly on the UK and Ireland. All of the talent journey, really. At Airbus, you may have heard of us, you may have flown with us. We design, manufacture, and deliver aerospace products across commercial aircraft, defense systems, rotorcraft, so helicopters, and we also do cyber defense systems and space systems, all sorts of things, really. Across the world. So essentially, we imagine what flight will look like in the future, and then we build it.
Amazing. And you've got probably the cutest looking plane with the beluga.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%.
Adorable. Amazing. Thank you so much for those wonderful introductions. So before we kind of dive into the how and all of your expertise around building a global employer brand, I would love to understand from your perspectives, and particularly specifically to your companies, what global employer brand actually means to each of you and why it matters. Klyde, I would love to hear your opinion first.
Yes, of course. I mean, global employer brand for me is something that an organization commits because it's who they are, it's who we are as a company, and it's what our employees actually experience consistently across the globe in that matter. I think for us, for Mondelēz, we have so many legacy brands, snacking brands, and I do think it's essential for us to think of it as an important, important part of our journey, because even though we do have legacy brands, legacy products, technically we are still in the space where we are a new company because of the name. It's roughly 10 years in the market. And even though we went through several changes, I think one thing remains all throughout. It's just the people, it's the culture that these people create. And it's not just how we market ourselves. Global branding is not just how you market yourself externally, but it's also how our colleagues, say in the UK, in the Philippines, in Poland, or say in Brazil, actually experience Mondelēz. And I think it's very true in the company, because while we're ensuring we're also respectful of the local nuances, in Mondelēz we have what we call local first but not local only. So respecting the local relevance, but also ensuring that we're giving a footprint of how the scale and how the global market is available, especially in the markets where we operate in.
Brilliant. And I think that's such a valuable point. As you said, it's not just about the brand and the marketing. It's also about how people experience work day to day. And I think that's quite often forgotten. Often you'll hear companies talk about, oh, we're building an EVP, we're building an employer brand. Actually, a lot of it already exists. It's how you kind of eke that out, how you eke those stories out, and how you really bring that out to market and help that to be put in front of people that it might resonate with. Very often the culture, the things that you offer, those career progression pathways, how you treat people, all of that is naturally going to feed into your employer brand. Hope, I'd love to come to you to understand what global employer brand means to Camunda.
Yeah, I feel like, for us, we're, for sake of this conversation, we're very kind of new to market too within the last, 10 years. And we've really started making a larger push from a global perspective. We are a German founded company, but we are a global company. And so for us, we really need to be sure that we have a clear and consistent promise of who we are as an employer, but expressed in a way, tying back to what we just talked about, is how we can resonate it locally, but without losing its core truth. This can't just really be a tagline. It does have to be something that people experience and they feel, and it's not a complete mismatch tied to what their day-to-day looks like, right? For us, one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how we are creating consistency across all of the work that we're doing. And at the end of the day, for me, I really think that employee brand, you need to have clarity around your mission, your alignment to your values, and that candidate experience has to reflect the reality of what it's like to be here. Because if not, then none of the work that we are talking about today will matter at all.
Totally. And it might be brilliant for attraction, but retention will really, really suffer within the first 3 months.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly that. It's oh, you said you're a really lovely, supportive, progressive culture, and it's the total opposite. Yeah, you're going to have a real shock at that beginning. So it's really important that authenticity is in there. Rob, I'd love to hear from Airbus's perspective, because obviously you are all over the world, and you've also got the natural challenge of having that white collar, blue collar split as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this point on authenticity is really important. So we've got more than 180 different locations around the world. And each of them has their own quirks, it might have a slightly different contract type. There might be different things available. So when we are going global, we're talking about what's our purpose as an organization? What are our values? They're the things that pull all of these 180 sites together. But then when we're looking the next layer down, we're looking regionalization, nationalization, those sorts of things. That's when you need to sort of pull out these different stories. And then absolutely the sort of the office based, the white collar, and the factory based, the blue collar, they're completely different markets. I love hybrid working. I'm not hybrid working anymore. But realistically, that's not a reality for tens of thousands of our colleagues around the world, because we build some really small stuff, but we built some really big stuff as well. And it's not possible for us to deliver an aircraft wing to your driveway so you can work on it whilst you're on shift, and then it's just not possible. So we need to consider that as well, because of course we don't want to say, hey, you can work from home.
Yep.
But actually you cannot. Like, it's not possible for all the jobs. But so I think this authentic expression on who we are and what we do is so important, and then that is very, very layered.
Yep. I think that also really helps for potential employees that are thinking about joining to really bring that experience to life. People love stories, people love relating to people, and then you can really understand, okay, well, that's the kind of work life I'm going to get once I join that company. So I think those stories can be super powerful. Helen, you've obviously got a similarly complex organization with Microsoft, literally one of the most global in the world. So I'd love to understand from your perspective as well what a global employer brand means.
Yeah, I realized I didn't introduce what Microsoft does, but I was most people know who we are. And I think that is half the battle, I guess. Most people know who we are, but perhaps don't know all the things that we do. And similar to both what Rob said and Hope around how we get that, there is always the constant truth in our global employer brand around what it's like to work here from a purpose, culture, what our growth looks like. And that needs to be consistent, because ultimately candidates can find out about that truth online so much easier now than ever before. So if we're saying different things in different places, that trust from a brand perspective drops. So and yes, we do localize it, like Rob's saying, and we tailor the messagings dependent. And a lot of people don't realize with Microsoft, we do have a blue and white collar split, but you don't really probably aren't aware of that. So, we're known in the market for software engineering, for tech sales, those kind of roles. But a big part of what we hire is people who work in logistics, operations, and infrastructure for our data centers. And as Rob's saying about this flexible work piece, that is not, that flexibility plays out slightly differently. We're expecting them to be on site 100% of the time. However, flexibility in terms of how they're supported, whether they're a working parent or need to leave to go for a medical appointment or whatever it is, they are supported in that way. So yeah, we, especially in EMEA, with the variety of countries I have under my remit in terms of the roles that we have, the types of people we need to hire, we have to have that consistency, and then we localize it. And I'll be honest, it's really hard. And I don't for 1 minute sit on this call and go, I've got it right, I've nailed it, because I haven't. Especially with the pace of everything moving so much, and with AI and how people can find us now, on whether you're using Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, you can find out what it's like to work somewhere very, very quickly. So it's even more important that we're sending out these consistent messages around, what it's like to work here. And we haven't really done that very well in the past. So people have kind of joined with maybe assumptions of what it is like versus the authentic, stories of what it's really like to work here.
And I suppose it's both a blessing and a curse having a really well-known company, because you've got the perception in terms of, let's use Microsoft as an example, fast-moving tech company, going to be great from a learning perspective and a career progression perspective, but people probably don't realize that you do have those amazing approach to family-friendly benefits, flexibility, actually that you've got a very supportive culture, and those kind of things that you wouldn't automatically associate with a global tech company. So you want to both lean on the advantage of being so well known, but also make sure that you're not alienating people that perhaps actually would thrive.
Yeah, exactly.
Really interesting point there that was mentioned a couple of times around flexibility and how challenging sort of blanket wording can be in a global employer brand perspective, because hybrid working can exist within one role, but it can't exist within another. Flexible shift patterns can exist within one role, but it might not exist within another. So I'd love to understand a bit more about the kind of building blocks of each of your employer brands and EVPs and what that means. Because I think that example of flexibility being perhaps overarching, but if you're in supply chain, it looks a little bit different to whether you're in an office. And I think that's one great example of something that's a flexible pillar that is also flexible. But yeah, I would love to hear a bit more about what the foundations of your employer brands are. Rob, I can see you nodding, so I will come straight to you.
Well, one of ours is about connection and collaboration. So with 180 sites, over 160,000 employees in our company, the biggest thing is connection and collaboration. So it's this worldwide presence. Like I work in Bristol. I spend most of my working time in Bristol, but I'm constantly in touch with like colleagues around the world doing different bits and pieces. So there is this sort of like globalization to our brand. In terms of like the flexibility, because we have so many different roles that require so many different things, we don't talk about flexibility as like a blanket thing. We talk about that, we push that down as like to a more localized level. So what we have available as flexibility in Singapore, for example, is very different to what we have here in the UK or what is available in France, although there is a general sort of framework, but the framework is this around hybrid working. That's a globalized thing, but that, as I said, doesn't apply to everyone. So we talk about how we are a family-friendly employer. We have these wonderful policies that allow people to be able to support their families, but also not everyone has families. So support their work-life balance, be able to, take leave almost whenever you like. Well, within reason. We're not one of those companies that has unlimited leave, but it's we have lots of different things, and I think this is where from a global perspective we sometimes will not be able to get the wording quite right because it's a region, and I can see Hope like nodding there, and I think it's quite a challenge for companies like ours that are enormous with so many different policies in place. But what I think, and my personal experience of Airbus and the experience of a lot of the people we talk to when we do our focus groups around EVPs and things like that, is that if they need to change something about their work pattern, if they need to leave a bit earlier because they need to pick the kids up from school, they need to go to a dentist appointment in the middle of their shift, we're very accommodating, life happens, and life happens whether you're in employment with us or not. So, we need to be quite sensitive to that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very powerful thread to have at all levels, right? That's something that can be both globalized and localized. So it's great to hear some of those examples in action. If I could see you kind of nodding along there, so I'd love to hear from your perspective what the kind of foundations of Camunda's employer brand are.
Yeah, so for us, the flexibility is a really big piece of it, and we don't have the same level of complexities that you all are having between, hybrid, on-site, and then some level of remote. We are fully remote, which makes this a little bit easier, but you have to be able to feel really good about how you're working in a remote environment, like how we're connecting with each other, how we're pushing each other to become better, how we're doing those types of things. But then also, having the flexibility, right? When you have a global workforce and teams that are very, very global, some of them are operating 24/7, arenas where, how are we operating and effectively communicating with each other and moving things forward? For us, like, we want to move fast. We want to do those things. So for us, flexibility means something a little bit different, but innately the same. Some of the other things that we really spend a lot of time thinking about is thinking about the impact that you make, and how you are going to be able to solve problems differently. We talk a lot about being a manager of one. We talk about, we have a very high level, high standards that we have around what great looks like, but we also have a very high with everyone that we work with. And for us, that's something that has to be front and center in terms of how we go to market as we think about how we work, how you would be successful with us. And, is this going to be the right kind of place for you? And then, for us is like, what we do is we're like helping companies very similar to yours, everybody else on the panel, build what tomorrow looks like, right? In terms of how AI works, how it's built together, how we use it as consumers, how we use it as employees, how we do those things. And so for us, really having that level of creativity and innovation and aspirational type mindset is something that's really important. And then obviously, we just really want to work with real great people. Like we want low ego. We all are working very hard. We're, just like everybody else. And we just want to be sure that the time that you spend with us, wherever, if it's in your office, if it's at your table, if it's while you're traveling, then you're getting the best that you need to not only fill yourself up professionally, but also have some fun along the way.
Nice. I like that way of framing it, in the sense of it's not necessarily about what you offer, but it's about the kind of people that you want to attract. Thinking about, you want that low ego, that very like people that will own something, that will want to drive it forward, that want to build something. And I think it's interesting to think of it from like that persona lens, in terms of those kind of people exist all over the world, right? That's not a local thing. And so then how do you attract those people in those different localized geographies?
Yeah, we're playing around with this moment right now on our website. We're in the middle of thinking about like a refresh for our careers page. And there's this idea of putting in like, if you carry these types of traits, or these are the types of environments that you like here are the things that we think you would do well here, right? Yeah. Versus it flipping on the other side of like, if you don't have this, then you can't be a great fit, like kind of switching it on its head and thinking about like, if you possess these types of qualities and this is the type of environment that you like, we think that you could be a good fit here. And here's a way to demonstrate that, as you're in the middle of an interview, or as you're thinking about what it could be like in your day-to-day here. So it's just some of the things that we're playing with. With the number of employees that we have the flexibility to play with that a little bit more, before we get much bigger, right?
That time, yeah, where you're scaling fast, but you've still got the freedom to be able to test, yeah.
That's the most fun.
Yes, 100%. Helen, I would love to understand from Microsoft's perspectives kind of what the foundations for you are.
Yeah, so we've actually just gone through refreshing our EVP, as you spoke about, Molly. Your employer brand exists. It is what people often say about you behind your back. So we've just gone through a refresh, just because we are at a moment, and similar to Hope in terms of this world of AI, we are very much obviously at the forefront of that. And so we needed to kind of relook at kind of what we are now and where we want to go in the future. So it's made up, as most people's are, of pillars and a tagline, etc. If you're looking at pure EVP strategy, the first one, so flexibility for us was very much something we talked about a lot when we talked about hybrid working. But again, we realized that was discounting the data center world, which is a big part. So again, that's why we pivoted to talking about flexibility, which runs through our EVP, but we don't purposely call out, because it's just something, as you said, Molly, it depends on the role of what you see as flexibility. And as Rob was saying, same as if you want to go to a dentist appointment in your data center, you can work your shift around it. I get to work from home all the time. That is just kind of how it works, dependent, and so flexibility looks differently for me. So it's split into kind of three areas for us. The overarching thing is how we work as a team to kind of win in the market. It is something that we know a lot of our competitors are going, we're all going after the same thing. We don't want people who are working on their own, and there's no I. We do want people to do it as a team. That's very big as part of our culture. So how do we collaborate? How do we cross collaborate? As well as like working with the best people. We want the best people to come here and build the future with us. And we want people to feel like they can do their best work, so support them with all different types of learning. Obviously, LinkedIn is part of our one of our products, I say now, it's part of our company. So we're very lucky that we have a suite of learning within Microsoft Learning, which all of our customers and there's free Microsoft Learning you can do, but we have all the LinkedIn stuff. So we want people to build their career here, but we also want to make sure we are going to market saying we are, as you said, fast-paced. We do want high performance, but you will be rewarded for that. So if you thrive in that, we do make that clear, because again, we want to make sure we are hiring the right people to move forward as a business. And then changing the world, similar to what Hope said, we work on things that affect everybody. And I don't think they realize, especially with the data center piece, the impact that our products have, but also on customers, but also it's hospitals, it's schools, it's governments, it's Microsoft is supporting all those things, so people can so we empower the world. Ultimately, that's part of our mission. So if we want people to be part of that, and if you thrive and you want that impact, and you want to be able to work at a place where we lead with security first and accessibility, and you want to change the world, that's kind of one of our kind of other key pillars as well. So yeah, 3 kind of things, but all kind of come under this thriving together piece and winning.
I'm on mute. No, I'm not. I'm about. There we go. Can you hear me? Sorry, I got stuck on mute for a while there.
Yes.
So I would love to hear, Klyde, about what the foundations of Mondelēz's global employer brand are, and then can obviously dive into this question, how we start to bring all of this.
Yes, of course. I mean, for Mondelēz, we have 3 brand pillars, which happen to be our main values as well in the company. So it's all about loving our brands, growing every day, and doing what's right. And for me, it highly resonates with me. We have a whole wide of brands where when you say Cadbury, when you say Toblerone, people can just easily connect with that. You would have different memories, whether you were in your childhood, when you were in the uni, or potentially when you're working, on the go snacking. I guess the way we try to always position ourselves is that we always wanted to bridge that brand side with who we are as well as a company, because we want to attract the right people who love snacks as much as we do, but also see their passion within this space. So I think Grenade is also part of our business. So the whole healthy, mindful snacking has been embedded as well in the company. So we try to focus on how can we attract more people with the same passion and rigor to innovate the legacy brands that we already have in the company. The other bit of that is because we have a global scale. The opportunities that you have is also cut across borders. There's opportunity for you to work in different regions. I mean, I've had the opportunity in the Philippines to move to the UK, being able to, meet a lot of diverse people, and having that I guess the whole flexibility bit really is different for each of us. Like I would work most of the time from home, but also I would have the chance to work 5 times in the office, because it's how it's working for me. But it's very different for, say, a manufacturing who is in a shift pattern where they're gonna be working 4 days straight, but then gonna be on leave, or say on break on the next 4 days. So I think over the past year, what we're trying to do is really identifying what this flexibility means on each of these persona, and aligning how their roles or the expectation of their roles means for them, because we can't go out to the market and say, oh, we're offering all of these flexibility, but then you're going to be in the manufacturing, so it means actually different for you. So I guess really balancing that out, while all at the same time linking everything back to the legacy that the brands the legacy of the brands that we have in the market.
That's such a powerful thing. Having such strong D2C brands means, you do have to really find people that, to your point, love snacks and care about snacks, because that's such an important part in terms of what's going to drive and motivate people. And it must be a huge strength in the sense of there are so many ubiquitous brands that everybody knows. So immediately when they find out, oh, that's actually part of Mondelēz, there's that immediate pull. And I'm sure that people have a very positive perception. But I'd imagine there's a challenge as well where perhaps people don't know that that's all owned by Mondelēz and that you could go and work for a company that creates all of that too. That's also a wonderful kind of segue into, you know, how we test and learn and activate and understand actually what is working and what isn't working. But just very briefly, I'm going to pause and just let our audience know that there's very much time for questions at the end. So please do, if you're listening, drop in anything that you would like to know from our experts, and we will, of course, endeavour to answer all of your questions. And just very briefly as well, we've talked quite a bit about the concept of the fact that your employer brand probably already exists. And at Flexa, we've got loads of data around what people want from their next company. And so for this webinar, we've built a fun little quiz to help you to understand if you've got an excellent employer brand already there. And so what you can do is put in all of the things that you offer, the kind of culture that you have, and then you'll get a little score at the end to understand, are you an A+, are you a B, how are you resonating with talent in your market? There's a little QR code that's just appeared up in the screen there. So please do scan that and you'll be taken through and you can take that quiz, and hopefully that helps you to understand if you've got those foundations and those building blocks of a winning employer brand. But let's come back to our questions, because we've talked about what a global employer brand is, what the foundations that you need are, but the really difficult how we then get that to attracting the right talent locally and actually on the ground. So I'd love to understand, Helen, I'll come to you first, around that process. Like, how do you test and learn? How do you know what's working, what isn't working, and what's your process?
As I said, obviously we're in early stages, so I'll talk through where we're at right now, where we have a global employer brand that, from a, you know, messaging, from a purpose, culture, career development, you know, is consistent across the globe. And what we're trying to do now is not just launch it and hope it works. I've worked in this industry for over 15 years, and I've built EVPs in very different ways dependent on the company I've worked in. I don't think there is one way. When I first came to the industry, I was like, oh no, it has to be done this way. We must do this and this. And it's just not how that happens, dependent on the business you're in, the team you have, the budget, everything. So for us, we've had to do that. Again, I'm one person for all of EMEA. So if that gives anyone on the call insight, if you're worried, even at the scale of Microsoft, it is just me covering, you know, 60 plus countries. So the way I have to fiercely prioritize how I do this. And so it is where we are got the largest amount of hiring, where we've got the priority role skills that we're trying to attract. We will sanity check our messaging within the local TA and HR teams, especially our TA teams who are talking data candidates. So they're knowing what our candidates are looking for, the motivations of why they would want to join us. We A/B test across our paid organic kind of social channels to see what actually is getting the traction with our audience, what's the feedback. We often do, like, especially through that testing with TA and our HR teams, because I can't be everywhere, I need their feedback on, is this culturally going to translate? Because if it doesn't translate, then it's not going to work for that market. And obviously, if we have bigger things that we need to do, I'll pilot in a few markets first, and then before I kind of roll out more broadly. But yes, and then again, we look at data points, and I would imagine a lot of people are still on this journey of tracking source to hire. I don't know if anyone gets there. Looking at, you know, our pipeline, looking at our conversion rates, things like that, because that's ultimately what I'm here to do, is to help our teams hire great people. So I need to look at that data in terms of what's converting to apply, what's converting to interview, where's it's coming from. Am I seeing any differences when I'm going to market with different creative, different stories, that kind of stuff. So yeah, for us, it's kind of on small steps we're doing it. We're trying not to launch everything globally looking the same, and then I have to prioritize that. So at the moment, data centers is a big part of my role, and that meant we've had to slightly change the work in terms of to appeal to that audience, because they want very different things.
Yeah, and I think that's such an inherent kind of challenge. Employer branding is how you can measure that, because it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, somebody saw a wonderful campaign and then they perfectly went through and went on your careers page and then they clicked a job and then they ended up hired, and you can attribute it all to them seeing the fact that you've got great parental leave. It's not, I wish it were as simple as that, but it's just not. It's one of those really like long-term perception shift changes of somebody saw a campaign telling a wonderful story about somebody who's thriving on a returnship scheme, that embedded in their memory. And then 6 months later, when they were thinking about moving roles, they thought of your company. And so it's one of those things, a little bit like out of home or top of funnel marketing, where you can see that change over time and you can see the data. And obviously, when you're talking to candidates and people coming in, they're like, oh, it's because I saw you had XYZ, or your culture or career progression opportunities really resonated. But if you're feeling out there in the audience like it's really hard to track and to see that impact, you're very much not alone. It's one of those very thorny, without incredibly technical pixels, everybody opting into cookies and everybody remembering where they first found you. It's an impossible job.
Yeah, and it's the constant balance between short-term metrics versus long-term, and the business. We're all in roles where the business want to know now, like what's working now. They don't want to wait 6 months' time.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to capture that passive talent as well, because so often the people that you want aren't actively looking for a job right now. So you need to be at the front of their radar when they do eventually choose to leave. So it's all these competing priorities. And as Helen, you rightly pointed out, people want stuff to work now and to know exactly how it worked and will it work again. Klyde, I'd love to hear from your perspective how you take those foundations and then into kind of activate that EVP and turn that into, in your words, a local employer brand, but not just local.
Yes. By the way, I can say I echo you, Helen. I'm also a one team. You supporting Hero for this one. I guess for us, it's really trying to give that accountability alongside with our recruitment team. So while it's a one team at this point, I think late last year we decided to bring a couple of people from each of the business unit where we are operating with, so that we have a central scope or a central umbrella of what's happening across the region, but also getting sentiments as quickly as possible from the local team whenever we do wanted to launch a campaign or to pilot a campaign within a specific persona. So we're seeing good results in terms of actually, empowering the teams in the local market to bring something to the table. Though um, there would always be conversation though about, oh, we need to prioritize their operations, but I'm not focused on employer branding. So do we keep them aside and everything? I think that's where having the whole European umbrella in my case is helping, because you get to see what's happening in the market where you can provide support, etc. Normally when we do campaigns, I would say it's very intentional. We don't have much budget, and we heavily rely on authentic storytelling, on what's needed, what can what can be impactful that will drive business result. And I'm smiling when Helen was saying earlier about source of hire, because it's a topic that keeps on popping every now and then, and we're trying to be very intentional on really measuring where do we want to invest our resources, but also when we do invest our resources, do we provide them with the right messaging? Are we tracking are we targeting the right set of talents, who we wanted to attract? I guess the other bit to that is really ensuring as well that the people internally is vouching for what we are campaigning before we go live externally. So even if it's like a couple of 3 or 5 people, we try to socialize that with them before we go out externally, so we know it's something that is relevant to the talent pool that we wanted to approach. What else? Yeah, I think I'll end with that. But I think the whole point on being intentional and really managing the resources that you have at the moment is always something that we have in the equation.
Yeah, I've never really spoken to an employer brand team that feels like they're over-resourced. It's always the other way around, whether these are one, two, or a few people juggling a hell of a lot of tasks. Hope, I would love to come to you to understand, how you take those foundations and activate them into an employer brand that attracts the right people.
No, that I think my answer is gonna feel very similar, but it's also going to have a little bit of a different feel because we're just from a different place right now of where we are from a company. We're not only building employee brand, we are building our brand, right? We are not like a well-known company to most. If you are in the agentic AI space and you know what that was 4 years ago, then you would know who we are. But we're not a household name, so to speak, right? And so for us, it's this beautiful balance of trying to get our name out there, but then also being able to portray the employee brand in a little bit of a different way. Because while we will focus on certain regions. Right now, what we're really focusing on is like who we are, what we believe in, and how we stand. And so I'm sure there's lots of people that are either listening to this later or watching this now that may feel like they're in that same type of environment. And that's great. That's okay. I think having that great partnership with your marketing team, understanding what and influencing some of the work that they're doing around what that looks like and vice versa, right? That to me is going to be something that as like where we are, it's a little bit of a different feel. Everything that everyone's talked about so far in terms of metrics and source of hire and all of those things, that's definitely something that we look at all the time. I think that has to be your almost like your foundation is. I always like to work backwards. Like I think about PA and I think about employee branding, I think of it as one big product. And so if I put in like the product building and the product type of life cycle, I always want to work backwards. And so you can always get, not always, but you can tend to get more budget when you can have some data that reflects the work that you're doing, because it's really great to have a beautiful way of how something makes you feel or how something looks that's very visually appealing and it's on brand for you and it's tasteful and mindful. But if you can really tie your metrics back to then go tell the story of impact, then for me, I think that's when you start really being able to balance the metrics in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, I think that's it's really valuable advice to think about. Yeah, we'll see where are those gaps, where are the people that you're struggling to hire, where are the people that are much easier, and then trying to understand why that is, starting with that layer of data and that foundation. Definitely a very smart way, given that it's such an opaque black box of trying to track everything in the first place. Rob, I would love to understand, when you bring this to life, how you test, how you activate and iterate.
Yeah, so we did a complete revamp of our EVP last year. I'm saying last year because it was kind of came in stages. Prioritization of which markets are the most urgent for us. So although I say it's done, it's a living thing. We're constantly adding a new market here to that, or a nuance, or and people that we want for aerodynamics engineering have got slightly different preferences to people that do software engineering. There's layers upon layers. But the way we test it, we do a lot of A/B testing with our marketing campaigns, and we're really fortunate in the way we're structured in Airbus that employer brand and the marketing team, we are the same team. Yeah. So this feedback loop is constant because we are always talking to each other, whether that's like our weekly stand-up or like when we all get together like in place in person, which is wonderful. So we do have a really quick feedback loop on that, so we can really see what's working quite quickly, and also crucially what's not working. One of the things we see is like not working sometimes actually. And when you put something out there, the message is just super generic. Like it works, but it doesn't get that extra 1% click-through rate that ultimately we're looking for. Although then the click-through rate getting to source of application, bit muddy. But I'm really glad to hear from my fellow EB practitioners that this is a sort of point for everyone. It is interesting. I think also one of the metrics is when your employees will write on LinkedIn or Glassdoor, and you read those reviews or what they're saying, and it's part of your EVP. You say, oh, it's as if they've read the EVP playbook. You know that you've got your EVP right.
Yep.
Your employees are organically
talking about those things. Yeah. And then that's coming back almost like a full circle to the first things we were talking about, that authenticity, the making sure that it actually is reflective of reality, is ultimately going to be the most successful, because you're also then going to attract through that content like-minded people that will thrive and feel as if they'll belong, they'll stay, they'll create that content again. Kind of wonderful life cycle. But one more question before we go to audience questions, because we've actually got quite a few coming in from various channels. And it's something that I get asked quite often talking about employer branding, is how do you even start to know what people want? And how do you tailor that? So if, for example, women in tech is always a huge theme when we think about how we want to attract talent. How do you know what of your offering women in tech want? How do you know what to talk about in order to attract those right people, rather than making assumptions? And that could be across anything. You're trying to get the best minds in AI to want to join your organization. What do you need to offer them to make sure that they definitely want to join? So I'd love to understand how you move away from just making assumptions and really understand what that talent wants. Hope, I would love to come to you first.
Sure. We think about this a lot, because for us, that changes just in the world in which we're in right now. What people want, it feels like it, and I think we all probably feel this, is changes pretty quickly. And when you think about different markets and you think about things like that, we tend to look a lot at what data we can get, right? We think about what's coming from feedback from candidates around what influenced their decision to join, or unfortunately maybe not join, right? We think about and analyze our exit interviews as well, thinking about like what we talked about earlier, like, oh, you said it was this and it's really that, where can we really pick up on those themes? And then we break that down and we can look at that by region, or we can look at it by skill set, or, however those things look. And then we partner really close, like with our business, with our recruiting team, but also our business, our people business partners, to understand, anything that might be some change happening inside an organization or whatever, so that we can start thinking about how we look at that a little bit differently. So we really look for that pattern recognition, I think is the other piece. And sometimes that is done very methodically, and sometimes that is literally just listening. It doesn't have to be some big, huge project. Sometimes it's literally just listening. Yeah. And then being able to take that and think about how you can frame it, or think about things differently, and then go over it, or potentially overlay it with what you have, and make sure that those two things are resonating together.
Nice. Really useful advice. Rob, I'd love to understand from your perspective. I know we talked about your Gemini model, and we've obviously done some work on different personas in the past, but I'd love to understand how you make decisions and move past assumptions when it comes to what the talent you're trying to attract wants.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to data for us on a lot of things, but not only. I think, I'll come on to my Gemini model and how I exploit Gemini to do my legwork, essentially. But the data is really important. But I don't think, like, when we're talking about data, we're talking often about enormous databases of insights from hundreds of thousands, millions of users across Flexa, LinkedIn, Universum, all these different things. And I suspect that there'll be people listening to this that don't have access to all of this, and that's absolutely fine. Your own employees are a really good source of data. And when we did our EVP refresh, we did it not that long after sort of a company-wide engagement survey. So we had lots of data already on what our employees already thought of us, and it was fresh and it was new and it was good data. And we could, pass that down into like regions, into countries, into sites. So we could already have quite a big data set available. But Molly, you mentioned it, so Gemini, other AIs are available, which you'll hopefully be glad to hear me say. I have really, I've used a feature in Gemini. It's called Gem. It's available. The same thing's available on lots of different platforms. Gives Gem data from lots of different things. So I have a gem that specifically has knowledge from industry reports, Flexa reports on women in tech, defense, and engineering. So I just go to this gem and I'm like, hey, I'm looking to hire more people to do this job in this location. Where should I start? And it just plays that out for me. It takes from all these different sources, all attributed back to its original source, and says, here's a starter for 10.
Yep.
And that cuts down, for me anyway, it cuts down a lot of research time. And it also allows me to pull in data from lots of different sources without having to go back to what I just remember as my days at university, where my desk would be like piled with printouts of journals and bits and pieces like that. I'm really glad that I don't have that anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, and you can use it to synthesize and get those kind of answers. But I think that point, regardless of which AI module you use, obviously Microsoft Copilot very much available, and but regardless of which one you use, or even if you are just Googling and trying to understand, what talent demand data is out there, there are some really useful pulse surveys. We publish kind of state of the market all the time, like what are the monthly trends that we're seeing in terms of what are women in tech or amazing go-to-market salespeople searching for, what do they care about right now? And because of that volume of data, you can get some really interesting insights, and some things are often quite surprising. Like we were digging into women in senior leadership as a persona the other day, and interestingly, one of the benefits that they prefer significantly more than the average user is paternity leave, which would be really, you just would not think that was going to be that much of a pull, being able to take a week off if you get a new dog, but huge pull. And actually, interestingly, on the opposite side, the things that you might think would entice women in senior leadership in tech, like compressed hours of job shares or part-time, actually under-indexed a little bit and was much higher within mid-senior rather than super senior. So you get some really interesting takeaways when you kind of dig into that data. But Helen, I'd love to understand from your perspective, and appreciate, obviously, you said like relatively early in the journey after refreshing, but how do you move away from assumptions and really try to understand what the talent that Microsoft needs wants?
Exactly what Rob said. Other AI tools are available. Very much have been being, resource and budget is more and more limited in our roles than it's ever been. And really have taken advantage of the same stuff, aggregating all the resources that are out there, whether that's reviews on Glassdoor, Reddit, Team Blind, which is a big one for engineering globally, and pulling that data in, as well as Hope said, around listening and hearing what our employees are saying through surveys. Recruiters often will give me feedback of what they're hearing in their markets, what they're seeing, what candidates are asking for. And then making sure that we are going to market to answer some of those questions, whether that's good or bad, because again, your EVP is acting as that first level of sifting. So we know we're not for everyone. We don't want to be for everyone, because we want to make sure we're hiring the right people for the business, because we don't want them to join and then realize it's not for them and then leave. So yeah, it's a great tool, AI, and everyone can use it now, because you can go and get ChatGPT if you like. It's made my life so much quicker. I remember doing desk research where we, going through competitors' careers sites and I used to have a team, luckily, of people in the past who would go through all of our Indeed reviews or our Glassdoor reviews, manually aggregate the scores, verbatim comments, try and monthly give back what's going on. Whereas Nat literally did it the other day for one of our sites in Romania. I'm not based there. I don't know as much about Romania as I want to know. And it did it within minutes and then mapped out key themes. And I was able to present that back to the business and say, this is what's going on in the market. This is why we're struggling. Here's why we need to do X, Y, Z for our attraction strategy and how we need to build advocacy and more employee stories. And it's just really powerful that now we've got that at our fingertips. Obviously, you need people like us to make sure what's spitting back out is right. And it's not, it's not the wrong data. It's not pulling stuff from the wrong markets. But for me, it's crucial in terms of how I do my job and how I don't make assumptions, because I definitely would. Otherwise, I'd be like, oh, maybe a year ago I did a campaign and this didn't work. But it changes. As you said, the market is shifting. It's changing really quickly. So we're able to get that up-to-date data really quickly.
Yeah, always having that kind of live updating feed and being able to synthesize it so quickly is incredibly valuable. Klyde, I'd love to understand the kind of data that you use in order to inform decisions and make sure that you're not, I suppose, making assumptions about people that you want to attract.
I guess the same with everybody. It's data led. It's where most of the campaigns, most of our persona are revolving. Looking at it with the help of AI, with a certain mindfulness on what you put in there, because it's a little bit I guess mindful for us in Mondelēz in terms of the whole usage, assessing that space. But I guess the other bit to that is for us, aside from the whole Flexa persona that we always receive from the package, is also using LinkedIn Talent Insights as a surrogate for most of the roles, especially at least for the senior roles that we have. We've seen value in terms of the data that we're getting from it, but also taking into account that it's with a grain of salt, trying to ensure that you also put some more areas to diversify your channels, and really picking up what's out there in the market. So I'll try to keep it short as that, but it's really pulling on the data. Where do we normally hire from the previous population of talents that we have as well. External research is always something that we're looking into, but also tying it always as well with the internal bits on where do we get much more talents historically as well.
Brilliant. That's all really valuable advice. And amazingly, all of those discussions, we only actually covered about 2/3 of my questions that I wanted to ask you all, because you will give them such wonderful insight. And it's been really great to be able to actually properly dive into the how, because I think very often, people will say, oh yeah, employer branding, you just put some campaigns out there and see who then comes through and applies. And it's very much not as simple as that. It's significantly more complicated. And there are so many steps and testing and failures as well. So with all of these questions, what we're going to do is we will collate all of the ones that came through from the audience. And then we will write this all up into a blog so that you've got all of that written, so that you can have answers to your questions. And we'll obviously come to our experts for any thoughts, and just make sure that, we've covered everything that you want to know. So without further ado, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for such an in-depth discussion, very honest as well about how you do your jobs. And I think it's really important to demystify the world of employer branding. And thank you so much to our audience for listening and being so engaged, and for all of your comments and thoughtful questions as well. And hopefully see you at our next webinar. Thank you very much, everybody.